Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Hey, welcome along to the Mark Steyn Show. There is nothing wrong with this country that a few 100,000 more Albanian males won't cure. That seems to be the gist of Tory immigration policy. Kelvin Mackenzie is here on that, and you can take that to the bank. But can you take it out of the bank? Ava Valadingerbroek is here on state regulation of what we used to think of quaintly as our own money. David Starkey is back from Eastern Europe, because in today's Western world, the East is the least insane part. And have you jabbed your kids yet? In Southampton, they're giving the children the wrong dose. But hey, just look at it as getting next month's booster just a few weeks early. Ros Jones is with us on a somewhat disturbing news story. Actually, I have some breaking news out of America. The director of the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, has tested positive again for the COVID. She last tested positive on the 21st of October, that's 10 days ago. So she took the Paxlovid made by altogether now Pfizer, and her COVID went away for a couple of days and she tested negative, but now it's back. Gee, it's almost like all this stuff is complete bloody rubbish that they're giving us. We'll get into that, plus the most important part of the show. That's you. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews with your thoughts on the passing scene. It's all coming your way after Polly Middlehurst with the latest news.
Mark, thank you, and good evening to you. The top stories tonight on GB News. The Home Secretary has described illegal immigration in the UK as an invasion on our southern coast of England. Speaking in the House of Commons today, Suella Braverman said the asylum system is broken, but she denied blocking the use of hotels for refugees. She also confirmed she's still committed to making the government's Rwanda policy work. Ms Braverman has been under increasing pressure over the backlog of migrants arriving in the UK, along with her admitted breaches of the ministerial code.
Some 40,000 people have arrived on the south coast this year alone. Many of them facilitated by criminal gangs, some of them actual members of criminal gangs. So let's stop pretending that they are all refugees in distress. And I am determined to do whatever it takes to break the criminal gangs and fix our hopelessly lax asylum system. That, Madam Deputy Speaker, is why I am in government. And that is why there are some people who would prefer to be rid of me.
Meanwhile, police are searching a property in Buckinghamshire in connection with yesterday's firebomb attack at a migrant centre in Dover. Kent police confirmed the suspect was a 66-year-old man from High Wycombe. He was found dead at a nearby petrol station later on. Police were called to the Border Force Immigration Centre where the homemade devices had caused a fire, leaving 2 people with minor injuries. And a warning today that all birds must soon be kept indoors across England amid fears of the spread of avian flu. From Monday the 7th of November, it will be a legal requirement to house flocks and follow stringent biosecurity measures with regards to birds. The decision extends mandatory housing orders already in force in Suffolk, Norfolk and parts of Essex. The Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs say this year the UK has faced its largest ever outbreak of bird flu, with the disease detected at more than 70 premises this month alone. International news, and the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly says Vladimir Putin is exacting revenge for his military failures on the civilians of Ukraine by cutting off their power and water supply. Russia targeted crucial energy facilities in several cities overnight. In the capital, Kyiv, a number of missiles damaged a hydroelectric power plant, leaving 350,000 homes in darkness. That's here, up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, where now it's time for Mark Steyn.
Thank you, Polly. Avian flu could be shaping up to be this week's monkeypox. By the way, did you see this story over the weekend? A painting by the acclaimed Dutch artist Piet Mondrian has been hanging upside down for 77 years and nobody noticed. This is the painting. Yeah, everyone's standing around admiring it, and they failed to spot that it's upside down. Here it is the right way up. And here it is the wrong way up. Oh, whoops, no, sorry, my mistake. Here it is the right way up. And here is the way it has been wrongly displayed for 3/4 of a century. I may not know much about art, but I know which way up I like it, and you used to be able to tell, at least with Meneer Mondrian's predecessors as great Dutch painters. For example, if you walked into a gallery and saw Van Gogh's self-portrait after he cut off his ear, you'd think, wow, you've got to be really good to paint a self-portrait while you're standing on your head, especially after you just cut off your ear. Or how about Bruegel the Elder? And the blind leading the blind upside down. Heavy. So it's like a metaphor for maybe the latest G7 summit. Clever, but perhaps a bit too high concept. But with this Mondrian thing, what's the diff? This is the right way, and this is the wrong way. Right? Wrong. What's the difference? Okay, you knew it was coming. You knew I wouldn't be able to resist. It's way too obvious symbolic power, so let's get on with it. Don't you find our politics is a bit like that? Here's Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, New Labour. Oh, and here's Cameron, May, Johnson, Truss, whoever, newish, Labourish, Tories. What's the diff? It's a distinction without a difference. The one great exception to the indistinguishability of our two governing parties for a quarter century now was Brexit, and that was imposed on the Tories only because David Cameron got head-faked into a referendum. In a functioning democracy, it should be extremely weird to have a fundamental issue on which the people are deeply divided, and yet every single party in Parliament takes only one side of that issue. Mr Cameron's ministry, the Labour opposition, the Lib Dems, SNP, Plaid Cymru, even Sinn Bloody Féin, under whom Irish nationalism has so degraded that they wanted to leave one impotent province of Brussels to join another impotent province of Brussels. One reason Britain voted to leave the EU was because of the so-called democratic deficit. Where do you go to vote out Cruella von der Leyen or the new Eurocommissar of the week, Thierry Breton, of whom more later? But the democratic deficit applies to the Palace of Westminster too. 6 years after the vote, most members of the Commons and the overwhelming majority of the Lords still do not accept the people's verdict. In fact, the democratic defamation embodied in Parliament's wall-to-wall Europhilia has now been extended to every other public policy. Here's the Conservative position on net zero, and here's the Labour position on net zero. Great. Here's the Conservative position on lockdown, and here's the Labour position on lockdown. Here's the Conservative position on free speech, gender identity, the Ukraine war, immigration, and here's the Labour position on free speech, gender identity, the Ukraine war, immigration. As Brexit should have taught us, it's not good for politics to take place only between parties that are in lockstep agreement on everything that matters. It's telling the citizenry that democratic politics is mere theatre. It's like getting a vote on who plays the fourth stiff from the right in some crappy amateur dramatics repertory production of a third-rate drawing room comedy. The cast changes, the plot and the leaden dialogue remain the same. Here is the most urgent example of this democratic deficit, the ever-widening gulf between the rulers and the ruled. It's the migrant tide on the southern shore every night, 1,000 a night. As we heard last week, somewhere between 1 and 2% of all Albanian males are estimated to have moved to the United Kingdom. As you can see, in almost any of the RNLI lifeboats shepherding them from French waters to the express check-in, there are no women, no children, just young military-age men, like that fella leaping off and setting his first foot on British soil. For the purposes of comparison, it's actually a larger invasion force than that dispatched by Tony Blair in 2003 to subdue the southern third of Iraq. It's well organised by multinational criminal gangs who have somehow co-opted the laughably misnamed UK border force, the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, and yes, the Home Office, and basically turn them into their business partners. There are deranged suicidal men lobbing petrol bombs at migrant centres. A guy like that can make the headlines. But there are also fellas who don't make the headlines, law-abiding but fearful citizens who now choose to sleep very fitfully with sledgehammers under their beds and with floodlights installed in their front gardens. You don't hear so much about them, but they're in the news. But these are asylum seekers. Nothing can be done. If that's really so, the quickest way for Vladimir Putin to take Ukraine would have been to send 100,000 Russian quote-unquote asylum seekers over the border. They'd be living in the Kyiv Sofitel and sucking up the entirety of the Ukrainian budget by now. Oh, and speaking of money, are you shivering in the dark? Waiting 2 business days for an ambulance just as the bank repossess your car? Here's some news so heartwarming you don't need central heating. This'll warm you. This'll warm your cockles all by itself. You, yes you, The British taxpayer, Mrs. Gladys Scoggins of 27A Acacia Gardens, you will be giving millions of pounds to Albania to, quote, spruce up Albania so none of the strapping young Albanian lads will want to leave. Have our nitwit political class ever been to Albania? Its unique selling point is how delightfully unspruced up it is. The communists couldn't spruce it up, King Zog couldn't spruce it up, the Ottoman Empire couldn't spruce it up, but Rishi Sunak apparently bestrides the Balkans like a colossus. Do you want to put a price tag on the sprucing up of Albania, Prime Minister? Let me know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. The editor of The Sun in its glorious heyday, Kelvin Mackenzie, joins me now. Kelvin, we are giving money to France, we're giving money to Rwanda, and now we're giving money to Albania. How's this all working out?
It's complete madness. I don't know what quite has happened to Michael Gove. I think since his marriage went pop so publicly, he appears to be lurching even further towards, I don't know, does he want to lead the Lib Dems or does he want to join the Labour Party? He wants to do something. He's hostile to landlords. He's now very much in favour of Albania. The interesting thing about Albania, it's for the last 30 years, the people who don't like Albania are the Albanians. They have been quitting the country literally for years. There is now only 2.7 or 2.8 million of them left. And actually, they're coming at us at a fair old rate. I suspect that Albania will become, I don't know, a new kind of sort of playground for the rich to carve up. The reality of all this is that we haven't got enough money to spruce up Preston. Why on earth should we be spending it to spruce up Albania? It is ridiculous. And what I worry about is this Michael Gove freelancing? What on earth has it got to do with him? He was put in charge of levelling up. Was he supposed to level up Eastern Europe as well? I mean, it's absurd. So has Rishi actually given the go-ahead to this? And has he been captured already and potentially getting into another ridiculous idea of which eventually he's going to have to stand up and say, I'm sorry, we're not doing this. There are serious, serious issues on the south coast of our country. The Times did a stunning piece the other day, which you just showed up there, that cutting, right, in which people were waking up to find people wandering around their garden, going into their house. One guy asked, where is Manchester? You know, I mean, honestly, they already know where they're off to. They are going off to car washes, they're going off to push drugs, they're going off to run gangs, they're going off to join their mates somewhere. And apparently what happens is after a while they discover that places like some places in Lincolnshire are actually worse than Albania, and then they go back there. This is an extraordinary moment in our lives. And actually, I am very much in favour of Suella Braverman, because at least she seems to believe in what she says. She does want to stop it. It's the first time I've heard a cabinet minister use the word invasion about 40,000 people coming to our country who are uninvited. And honestly, I find it difficult to shed a tear for one other thing. That Manston place, which apparently can hold 1,600 and has 3,000, why should we be upset that they are overcrowded? After all, they came here knowing full well that they were A, unwanted, and B, it was illegal. What did they want to do? You talk about the Sofitel somewhere. Is that seriously what was being that they thought they were going to get? There were going to be difficult times, and hopefully, in my case, they were going to be returned from the folk whence they came. But if they weren't, then they can start their lives. It's not I don't want them to be successful. I don't see why a little bit of discomfort at the beginning is a small price to pay for leaving a country. For instance, Albania is, what, 60-70% Shia Muslim. A lot of the people coming to our country are actually coming from the Middle East. They too are Muslims. So it's not that I want to deny them a decent life here. I first of all want to find out whether they're entitled to be here. And the fact that they have to put up with perhaps, living 4 to a room, it's probably better than where they came from. They probably were living 12 to a room or no room at all. So I don't think we should drop a tear over the overcrowding issue.
Well, look, this is a complete scam, Kelvin, because when you come from Albania to the United Kingdom, you're passing through some of the wealthiest societies that have ever existed in human history. So if you were a genuine refugee, you'd be perfectly content to stop in Italy or France or Austria or Switzerland. But the word has got out to the Albanians are clever people. They're tough and they're mean a lot of the time, but they're smart, and they've figured out that the United Kingdom is a uniquely soft touch among the advanced societies of the world.
Right, and the only problem about all this is that the numbers seem to begat numbers. So everybody, they throw away their mobile phones and the like and their passports when they arrive so that nobody can track who they actually are, what their age really is, where they really came from. But once they get here, through some bizarre, probably cash rather than tax society, they manage to do jobs, earn money, and then they get on the phones and they say, do you know what? It's great over here. Have you heard of anything over in Albania called universal credit? No, honestly, you want to get in this? They pay your housing, they pay your energy, they pay for your kids, they'll find a school for you. The health system seems to work great over here. You honestly want to get over here. So everybody is telling everybody it's a very good thing. What I cannot understand is why it is that Labour and the Tories and the Lib Dems aren't unified about one thing, to say we are going through a very poor patch at the moment. We can do without another 40,000 mouths, perhaps even 100,000 mouths to feed. Why is it, Mark, you know most things, why don't they say we actually don't want them, we're going to have to work out a system which pushes them back from the folk whence they came? See, Labour like them because they look upon them as their voters. They look upon them as their voters. Do the Lib Dems honestly think that these 40,000 are going to vote Lib Dems? Not even the people in the UK vote Lib Dem. So why is it that the Tories feel this way?
Well, exactly, because they're no longer Tories. I mean, the thing about that is they've surrendered to the media narrative, which is that even to ask the question is Albanophobic. We do everything for them. We give them 2 GP surgeries a week at these luxury stately home hotels we put them up in. No citizen of the United Kingdom gets to see a GP twice a week, and that's way better than Albania, where the health system involves swimming to Italy. So obviously it makes sense from the Albanian point of view, but you're right. Why does it make sense from a British Conservative Party view? I mean, is Suella going to do more than tough talk and actually act tough too?
Well, this is the issue. So it's going to be a fantastic... The great thing, I mean, it was shocking, that firebombing, but the great thing about the firebombing took those little numbers you saw saying these how many people came in yesterday, which gets, I know through my Twitter following, gets people massively exercised. It took it from being reported like that to reported like this. So suddenly it's a major political issue, whereas before it was a number where they used to have some curious people from Border Force. What's that? Oh, it doesn't really work. Don't worry about it. Now it's on the front page. What happens now? And the question is, this comes to Rishi's desk. Right? As they always say about prime ministers and presidents, when it comes to their desk, there are no easy solutions. But there must be a solution, no matter how difficult it is likely to be. And I do seriously believe that whichever Prime Minister happens to, quote, solve this issue will be guaranteed a re-election in 24. So if Rishi does it, that's great. And if he doesn't do it, then we end up with Starmer, who views them potentially as lobby fodder for his 2028-29 election. So there is a big bet on here. I am absolutely sure that people in our country do not want another 40,000, 100,000, 200,000 people from other countries with other cultures coming into our nation. I am absolutely positive about that. And I would like Rishi to understand that and say something about it, which is why I approve of Suella for the first time ever talking one word which is true, which is this is an invasion of our country.
Absolutely, and that's the only way, Kelvin, that the Tories are going to win this fourth election victory, which hasn't been done in the last 2 centuries. The only way they'll do it is by fixing this. People don't really know a lot about Albania, but all they do know about it basically comes from Liam Neeson movies, so they're not well disposed to becoming a semi-Albanian society. We're going to get to your thoughts next. That's GB Views at gbnews.uk. Plus, we know it's easy to put your money in the bank. Withdrawing it is getting a little more complicated. Also, who are all these chappies with fancy pants Euro titles bossing the world around? And children in Southampton were given the wrong dose of the jabber, 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 but don't worry your pretty little head about it. Ava Valadinga-Broke, Dr. David Starkey, Dr. Ros Jones, all standing by. Don't touch that dial. We're heading right back.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christys, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
GB News is the People's Channel, so let us channel what the people are saying. We wanted to know what percentage of the Albanian population should Britain take in. It's a bit of a pointless hypothetical because all 100% of Albanian men, no Albanian women, for those of you who like the Balkan totty, none of them seem to be coming. Narinda says it's not about percentages, it's about who is genuine. I think you'll find, Narinda, that all these Albanian men are very genuinely Albanian. Just you wait. Dan says, let any Albanian nurse come. Welcome. Oh, that reminds me, where are all the women and children? I don't see many frightened, vulnerable people on these boats. People fleeing war need help, but all I see are healthy young men who appear to have mislaid their wives and children. Well, they've been struggling from Albania through war-torn Italy and war-torn France to get to the UK. Aaron huffs. What a ridiculous tweet. Long live the EU and freedom of movement. Actually, you can't help noticing that none of these Albanians want to stay within the EU. The EU is just some transit zone. It's like, you know, somewhere on the motorway that you stop to go to the toilet and get a cheeseburger, and then you head on until you're clear past the EU. What percentage of British citizens should Albania accept, says Aaron? Well, all of them, because Albania is going to be empty at this rate. Rob Teal says, I heard on tonight's asylum debate that Germany and Sweden refused to take... Yeah, that's because they're full of Syrian refugees who've actually... Sweden took in so many that it's distorted their sex ratio. They've now got as bad a sex ratio, I'm not talking genders here, I'm talking sex, boys and girls, among the people who were 17, 18 when they arrived. It took them like 2 years to catch up with 40 years of China's one-child policy in terms of the excess young men and insufficient girls for them. That's what we're headed for if you look at what's coming ashore every night. Fi or fee or foe or fum, fee, fi or foe or fum says, so since there's so few Albanians left in Albania, perhaps the UK should colonise it and we can use it for farming and holidays. Like the real estate people say, location, location, location. There's never been a better time to buy beachfront property in Albania. You can Airbnb it until you're ready to flee the UK, which the way things are going will be, early in the new year, max. If you keep your money in the bank just for a rainy day, that might not be rain coming down, just the chairman of the bank urinating on your head from his office window. On this show a couple of months back, our pal Leilani Dowding went to her local branch to withdraw a modest sum under 500 quid and was asked by the bank clerk for what purpose she needed the money. Leilani being Leilani, she opened what I believe our American friends call a can of whoop-ass on the clerk. But the constraints on your use of your money are tightening around the world. The Dutch government has a new bill proposing to monitor all transactions over €100. That's about 100 quid, or indeed $100. All Western currencies are mysteriously converging right now, almost as if in preparation for the introduction of the digital Klaus Schwab mark across the entire Western world. Eva Veladinga broke the least deranged Dutch person in the Netherlands joins me. Can this really be true, Eva, that every single transaction over €100 is now going to be recorded and monitored by the state?
Well, if it's up to our Minister of Finance, Sigrid Kaag, that is exactly what is going to happen. Like you said, she wants to monitor every transaction that we spend. So that is basically everything nowadays. We all know that if you go to the grocery store, you end up buying 2 bags of groceries and that costs you €100. So everything that you are spending your money on will be known then by the banks and will be centralized. This information will be centralized and collected into a database that will be accessible for them and the government, I think up to 5 years later. So imagine, that's not just your diet. They won't just know what you buy at the grocery store. They'll know your medical bill. So they'll have information basically into your medical file. They will know what political party you give money to. They will know what you spend your money on a Saturday night. They will know everything about you through the money that you spend. And obviously, you wonder why. Well, our government says we are doing this to combat money launderers. Well, in the society that I live in, I would like to assume that we live in a rule of law, that we have a liberal democracy where the government doesn't treat its own citizens as criminals and that the presumption of innocence exists. Well, this obviously turns that completely around. So there's a presumption of guilt. You are treated as a criminal, and only if the government sees that you don't behave like a criminal, they will let you go. And that's obviously also the way that they basically guilt trip people into doing this, because people who oppose this, they will say to, well, do you have something to hide?
Yep. That's always the way, that if you're not guilty, what do you have something to hide? And I take it when I get these things now, every couple of weeks from people who say the banks in the UK wanted to know for what purpose you're withdrawing 150 or 200 pounds, that there are all kinds of other people who are just going along and saying, oh, yes, well, I was thinking of putting down a deposit on a holiday, or, there's not widespread resistance to this. People are going along with it, Ava.
Yes, and it's pretty much insane. If you would say, hey, you have nothing to hide. Okay, well, why aren't you okay then with the police coming into your house every day? You have nothing to hide, right? It's basically the same thing. You would think that people would never accept that. But then when it's about banks and it's about your banking information, then suddenly it's like, okay, well, I guess I have no argument against that. But we should have plenty of arguments against it. First of all, like I said, in a functioning society, you would think that the presumption of innocence is worth something. We live in a free society still, is what you would like to think. But also, this is very clearly a step towards a monetary system that is surrounded around mass surveillance and control. So if the government knows everything about what you spend your money on, that is only one step ahead away, I would say, from what we discussed last week. And those are the central bank digital currencies. Because 100 euros, come on, that is basically everything nowadays. So, and they also, within this bill, is maybe interesting to mention, they also prohibit cash payments of over 3,000 euros. So they're already cracking down on the cash too. So it's very clear where they want to go. They want to go to central bank digital currencies, a digital coin that they will control. And in the future, they will also control they won't just see what you spend it on, but they will be the ones deciding what you may spend it on.
Well, what I find interesting about that, Ava, is that even on the transactions under 100 euros, that only applies to consumer transactions. So if you want to spend 70 euros at Amazon, the Dutch government will still let you do that. But if I were to say, if you were to lend me 5 euros because I'm a bit short of cash this week, that's not a consumer transaction. And so in theory, that would be something that the Dutch government would use as the right to enter us in their database and monitor us. You can't actually spend under 100 euros in a way that you might choose to. How is this compatible with a free society?
It is not. It is absolutely not. So I hope that this law will get a fair bit of resistance. But so far, it almost seems to be going quietly again. It's the same thing we always see with these people. They pretend that they have a good pretext, that they have a good reason for why they are doing this. And it still seems to me like a lot of people don't quite understand what the problem is with all of this government control and all of this surveillance on your life. It might sound, I really do have nothing to hide. You could think that. You could say, well, no, I'm fine. But there comes a point in time where the government decides that you do, because the political party that you want to give money to is not the one that they like, or the food that you want to eat in your private house, the meat that you want to buy at the supermarket is not what they want you to eat. So you always need to think one step ahead. Is this the type of power that I want the government to have? Do I want them to have all of my information in a centralized data bank? I think not. If you want to have any type of privacy at all.
You're absolutely right on that, Ava. By the way, you've got plenty to hide. If they get wind that you're appearing on the Mark Steyn show every week, you are in a heap of trouble. I've got 23 groats buried behind the barn in case you're running low on cash, by the way. We're going to be needing to dig that out very soon. I mentioned earlier the dreary homogeneity of our constantly rotating leaders. In fairness to Rishi Sunak, in his first week in office, he was anxious to put some clear blue water between himself and Boris Johnson, so he announced that he would not be attending COP27, this month's big climate beano at the Egyptian holiday resort of Sharm el-Sheikh. Good for Rishi, I found myself saying. But look at this. What's this? Headline from the Financial Times. Sunak signals he could attend UN climate summit. Gee, it's almost like there's a three-line whip on all the globalist groupthink. If you figure we could use a broader sphere of public discourse, Elon Musk has bought Twitter and immediately tweeted of that poor little Twitter bird in a gelded cage, quote, "The bird is freed," to which Thierry Breton immediately responded, "In Europe, the bird will fly by our rules." Who's Thierry Breton? Don't worry your pretty little head about it. He's one of those people you've never heard of who runs the world. Some folks, once you get a ways east in Europe, chafe at all this. Here are weekend scenes from the capital of Moldova. That would be Chisinau, where thousands upon thousands took to the streets to protest against the EU and NATO and to demand an end to sanctions against Russia, declaring they weren't willing to starve and freeze for Ukraine. But sanctions are beginning to bite, because headline entertainers are now forbidden to tour Russia. Vladimir Putin has been forced into doing his own stand-up routine. I'll read along with this gag because I like it so much. So a German friend told me this joke the other day. A German family at home, the son asks his father, "Daddy, why is our house so cold?" Dad says, "It's because Russia attacked Ukraine." The kid says, "What's that got to do with us?" Dad says, "Well, we impose sanctions against Russians." The kid says, "Why?" Dad says, "To make the Russians suffer." And the kid says, "Daddy, are we Russians?" It's a cracker. It's the way he tells them. There is a lot of punitive transnationalism about. Brussels is currently putting the screws to Hungary because it's unhappy with Viktor Orban's so-called transphobia. I didn't realise trans compliance was a condition of EU membership, but apparently back in the 50s, the full name of the original European Coal and Steel Community was the European Coal, Steel and Trans Community. David Starkey is just back from Budapest. How does a nation state gets 20 million euros withheld because it's not in trans compliance, David?
Because Brussels says so. I mean, everything you've been saying, that's all it is. The Commission has appointed itself a monitor of good behaviour. And good behaviour now includes, well, actually tolerating people like me. But there's a very, and you were saying I was in Budapest, I combined it with my belief in, rather like Taki in The Spectator, high life and low life. I had dinner with the Minister of Defence one night and engaged in a rather sordid gay disco the other night. Let me tell you, there is a perfectly agreeable gay scene with charming young men and actually quite a lot of young ladies all enjoying themselves in a fashion that, well, not exactly would be regarded as outre in a London nightclub, but, wouldn't make you feel that they were wearing corsets or bustiers too tight. It was a nice scene. Again, this whole notion which the European Commission seems to harbour, that there is this omnipresent sense of Orban as a kind of new Putin, of Budapest as a new Moscow. I've been to Moscow. I can tell you there is no comparison. It's an extraordinary, Budapest is an extraordinary city, which, just like London, is much to the left of its government and is allowed to be to the left of its government. And there are trendy places and there are trendy young people with tattoos and nose piercings and eating strange vegetarian food. So this idea that there is some wicked anti-European thing isn't true. What is important is that Orban has dared to say, we do not like the general direction. You've been talking about, with Eva, one aspect of that general direction and the attempt at a kind of homogenization of finance. Another one, of course, is the European Union's attempt at homogenization of culture. That, what is regarded as an acceptable value in the Netherlands has got to be universally imposed on all of Europe. I mean, I'm sure you know, but most of us don't, what the experience of a country like Hungary is. Hungary was for its very beginning, and I was there in the Great Basilica Church of St. Stephen in the year 1000, when the Kingdom of Hungary is founded. It's the furthest outpost in Eastern Europe of what were then Western Christian values. It's an extraordinarily effective monarchy in the Middle Ages. It even has its own Magna Carta in the Golden Bull of 1222. And then you know what? It's conquered by Islam. It's conquered by the Turks in 1526, and it only escapes in 1686. That's the time of our glorious revolution. Then, of course, it's conquered again by Russia. It's torn apart in the First World War. A third of Hungarian speakers live outside Hungary. Is it any wonder that they resent a new empire being pushed upon?
Yep, you're absolutely right. In fact, Western Ukraine used to be part of what they now call Greater Hungary. So it lives with its history. What I find interesting as a general observation, David, I'll just run by you, is that the Western world seems to get less nutty the further east you go. So, the super woke, capital of super woke is the United States. The British dominions, in its fullest sense, all follow along with that, but a couple of years behind. France and Western Europe are marginally less crackpotted than the English-speaking nations. And then for the nearest thing to sanity in the developed world now, you have to go to Central and Eastern Europe. Is that how it struck you on the ground?
Yes, and there's a very good reason for it. They know what real tyranny means. They were occupied by the Germans. They were occupied by the Turks. They were occupied by the Russians. As late as 1956, I remember I was an 11-year-old boy. I just started grammar school. The scenes of horror in Budapest as the rising against the Russians was repelled, was repressed. The prime minister was dragged off first to imprisonment and then to execution. And you know what? Most of our intellectuals, our leading left-wing intellectuals, the great distinguished historians, what do they all do? They all cheer along. And so many of them actually say, it was actually worth what happened. That communism is such a noble ideal. We've never, ever contemplated what these countries endured. Poland is the same. Vast waves of population shift. We've no idea about it. We are complacent. They are not. And it is this resistance to a new empire, this resistance to new attempt at the imposition of reform that we're seeing in Eastern Europe.
Yep, that's very true. A new empire, an empire of bureaucrats from Brussels, and you can't dive. You can't. Yep. And you're right. Well, I'm glad you had a good time with the Minister of Defence and in the gay disco. You certainly have covered the scene in Budapest. Fabulous town. I can't speak for the gay discos myself, although I like a bit of the music. I don't know whether the Minister of Defence does.
I didn't notice
great
the
to
music.
see you. Thank you. I'll check out the playlist for myself. Stump the Steyn, Luke. Actually, I prefer Hungarian operetta. I'm so Squaresville. You can ask me anything. gbviews@gbnews.uk. And unlike Denmark, Sweden, Norway, our own public health authorities are still hot to shoot the jabber to your kids. Slight problem. In Southampton, they gave the wrong dosage. Dr. Ros Jones is here on that. Coming up. Don't go anywhere.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio and online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
Notwithstanding the disturbing findings of new studies in peer-reviewed journals, His Majesty's government is still determined to boost you up the wazoo, and His Majesty's court eunuchs in the media, such as Philip Schofield, are still eager to sign you up for it. But is the increasingly dysfunctional NHS even competent to do that? In Southampton last week, 36 children between 5 and 11 years old were given not the children's dose of the vaccine, but the adult shot, or what the BBC is benignly calling a, quote, higher than normal dose. Oh, just higher than normal, nothing to see here. This is what we used to call the wrong dose, or indeed, when it comes to certain substances, an overdose. Dr. Ros Jones is a paediatrician. What do you make of this, Ros?
Well, it won't be the first time mistakes have been made. It's very worrying because obviously these children didn't need even the correct so-called dose. Children do not need this vaccine. As far as I'd understood, the non-urgent offer that was made last February, starting in April, had actually stopped on the 1st of September, and it wasn't going to be given to any more children until they were 11 and a half years old. But then quietly it's come back in again. So suddenly at half term this week, there were pop-up clinics all over the place, and children invited to attend. Now, those clinics won't have been running regularly for anything other than adult services. So presumably they may not have even had the children's dose in the building. And who realised, because the parents got phoned the next day, as I understood it, they weren't even aware at the time they'd given the wrong dose. Now, I've just, because you've asked me to come on tonight, I quickly looked back at the trial data, and not surprisingly, they have these phase 1, 2, 3 trials. So in phase 1, they tested out different dosage schedules on a small number of children. They had the 30 microgram, which is the adult dose, or nanogram, the adult dose. They also had a 20 and they had a 10. And not surprisingly, the side effects were worse with each higher dose. So they decided that for the phase 3, which is the proper clinical trials, they would use only the 10 nanogram dose. So these children have been given not twice the dose they should have been, but 3 times the dose they should have been.
That's very interesting, Roz. You know, people think when they sign up for this that someone like you is going to be giving them the old jabber, or a nurse, a trained professional. In fact, it's people whom they hire on the internet. I was just looking at an ad today. You get £12 an hour, and you have to, the qualification is that you've passed your GCSEs. Is that a sufficiently high standard for the patient to give informed consent to?
Well, no. And I mean, there's 2 different parts of the process, as I understand it. I have a friend who came back from retirement and was giving vaccines in the vaccination hub. And he was an anaesthetist. I'm sure he knew how to give an intramuscular injection. But when they started rolling it down to children, and I said to him something about, so what are you telling them about myocarditis? He said, what do you mean? So he'd been given no information whatsoever. And then I said, well, when you're getting consent, do you explain to them that actually the risk of myocarditis is much higher for teenagers than it would be for a 75-year-old? He said, well, I didn't know that. But anyway, I don't get consent, he said. I only give the injections. So the consent is done by somebody at the reception desk, who equally may not be qualified. But you've come in having, presumably received an invite, which you might have then looked online to read the bump if you wanted to, or there might have been a leaflet, with the invitation, I suppose. But you might just turn up having read nothing at all. And the fact that you've arrived is enough for the vaccine centre to think you've had the information that is required for informed consent. So I think it's just a complete abrogation of all ethical practice, particularly given that this drug is still not fully licensed.
No, you're quite right. And as I said, in the case of these, vaccinator is now a profession now. But as I said, it's a profession with a very low entry level. You just have to have the GCSEs and know how to find a vein, which distressingly large numbers of the population are able to do. Thank you very much, Roz. Well, let's see if we've got time to stump it out, because we've got dear old Dan Wootton standing by. Oh, here's another Daniel. Daniel says, where do you think Britain will be in 20 years' time? In 20 years' time, Britain will be in Albania. That's pretty much it. There's a worrying increase in the number of shops and pubs only accepting digital payments. A drive to becoming cashless is underway, says Al. You're right about that. Dr. Dan Bayliss, by the way, we should, just to go back to what Roz was saying, we did ask the Chief Medical Officer at Solent NHS Trust to come on the show. He's a man called Dr. Dan Bayliss. He didn't want to come on the show. We are very sorry this error occurred, and we've contacted the parents of the children involved to apologise for the mistake. Thank you very much. It's no fun when you find out afterwards you've given the kid 3 times the dose you were meant to give. That'll do it. Dan Wootton's here to macerate your Monday. What you got, Dan?
Mark Steyn, well, you will have seen Trevor Noah, the host of The Daily Show in the US, trying to spread this falsehood that Britain has outraged Mark over the fact that Rishi Sunak is in power, and nothing to do with the fact that it was an anti-democratic globalist coup, all because of the fact that he is of Indian origin. Well, we have future Lord Tony Sewell, who actually proved that Britain is not institutionally racist, here to react tonight.
That sounds fun. I find Trevor Noah everything but funny. And if you actually Google around and you see that so-called comedy monologue he did on Rishi Sunak, there isn't a laugh in it. It sucks. He's going to be... that show can't continue, even in America. That's all coming up with Dan. After the weather, you'll have far more fun than with Trevor Noah. Stay safe, stay free.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio,
And online.
we're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your